Welcome back to the Dark Reading News Desk here at RSA 2023. Terry Sweeney here with Dark Reading, and joining me now is Duncan Greatwood, CEO of Xage Security. Duncan, thanks for joining us on the Dark Reading News Desk today.
Great pleasure.
Cyber attacks are trending up on critical infrastructure since the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack just a few years ago. Why do we see this trend continuing, and can you just address some of the underlying issues?
Sure. So I think there was some good news with the Colonial Pipeline attack, which was that it alerted a lot of people to the cyber risks that they were running. But the bad news, it also alerted the attackers to the vulnerabilities that existed in critical infrastructure that perhaps hadn't been so visible before. And those vulnerabilities, unfortunately, are pretty legion. You have very common attack patterns that happen over and over again. And what's even worse is that when the attackers get inside of those networks, there's very little to stop them proliferating their attacks across the entire system. And that was the great worry in the Colonial Pipeline case, was that if the attackers got inside of one pumping station on the pipeline, maybe they'd be inside every pumping station on the pipeline.
Sure.
And every pipeline operator, every manufacturer, every transport company has got similar kinds of issues. And so the mix of legacy equipment with modern cyber risk is a very difficult one.
When you think about the critical infrastructure protection across the 16 sectors that CISA has identified, is it just about protecting operational technology or OT, or is it a bigger issue than that?
It's both certainly a protecting of OT, but it's also more. What we're seeing in operational businesses is that they're increasingly linking their physical operations with their IT departments, even with the cloud, with their suppliers, with their customers. And so something that once upon a time would have been shut off from the outside world is getting very interconnected. The protections that come as a natural thing in a cloud service, if you're logging onto your bank, well, suddenly you need equally strong protections when you're running a floor of a manufacturing plant, and all the way from the floor of the manufacturing plant through to the headquarters IT infrastructure and the suppliers and everything else. So it's becoming a kind of integrated application that goes from the physical to the digital and covers all of the grey areas in between.
Xage handles security for both OT and IT systems and networks. Tell us a bit about some of the differences between these two realms where security is concerned. They don't necessarily map well to each other, do they?
Right. That's right. And so I think there's always that risk of people talking past each other. The IT security mindset meets the OT people. Sometimes we call it the difference between the carpeted office building and the concrete floor. In an operation, you're going to have these legacy systems, and you can't take them out of service, you can't patch them, you can't do anything to them, they just have to run forever. But you have to kind of overlay security on top of them rather than replacing them. You also have a need of more defense in depth inside of the operation. So you don't want to make it that the loss of one physical site results in the loss of all physical sites. You need layers, and you need independent protection of each layer. You also have to exist in environments where operations have to be continuous, even if you lose connectivity to the outside world.
Right.
There's scarcely an issue in a data center in the modern world, but if you're running a wind farm, then you may lose connection once in a while, and you still need your security to operate in that situation.
Anecdotally, I've heard from some IT people that they're surprised to learn that not all OT equipment is networked.
Right.
So I guess there's that stumbling block as well.
Right. So you have systems that are cut off and maybe connected via they have these old serial cables. Well, IT people haven't seen serial cables since they cabled up a printer in the 1993 or something.
Sure.
But those things still exist in the operational world, and they may ultimately connect into a more conventional network. But the need to protect every kind of system, whether it's isolated system, whether it's temporarily networked, whether it's permanently networked, all of those things have to work together in the operational cyber-physical environment.
Xage has been talking a bit about the new multi-layer identity and access management innovations here at the RSA conference. What should viewers know about this?
So really this is another step forward in the defense in-depth strategy for operations. It's very common now for people to say, well, zero trust should be done in operations. That's kind of the next step for operational security. It's often reacted against by the people actually responsible for the operations because they're saying, well, I can't do all those zero trust things. How am I even going to do that? And we sort of try and bring it down to practical reality of, well, zero trust means you're protecting each identity, which for an operational person means you're protecting each asset.
Okay.
And you're going to do that, and you're protecting each asset, each site, as I said, and in a layered way. And that means that you have to manage identity at each of those levels. That's why we call it multi-layer IAM, or identity and access management. And the ability to do that then means that rather than having these very vulnerable systems, you can have systems that have a natural login. You get single sign-on capability across many systems. You can impose multi-factor authentication, just again as you would in a financial application that was valuable to you. And so we're really applying these defense in-depth principles and zero trust principles, but again in that operational environment and to those applications that span operations, IT, cloud, just as you asked about before.
Okay, but zero trust itself on the OT side is not a heavier lift than it would be on the IT side?
I think it's a little bit of a different lift.
Okay.
It has to be zero trust that works the way you do if you're an operations person.
That's well said.
If you just try and take the zero trust of IT and sort of forklift it into the operational world, that generally goes poorly, and it's ill received and it doesn't work, and then everybody's kind of embarrassed. But with the right zero trust approach, you can actually help the IT people and the OT people kind of achieve common security goals together. So
sure.
There can definitely be a powerful approach when it's done right.
Say more about that. There's so many different approaches to zero trust security. Mm-hmm. What's different about Xage's?
Yeah, so I think one thing you would recognize coming to RSA is that zero trust can be a marketing sticker that is applied many products and many situations, whether it's really meaningful or not. So I think the first difference with our approach is that we really are delivering identity-based protection for each individual asset and preventing the spread of attacks even when they get inside of the operational environment, so containing and controlling those attacks. We've also adapted the zero trust principles to the realities of operations. Even machines with no built-in strong identity of their own can be protected. Even situations that are disconnected will continue to provide login if you're there locally. We had one customer who flew their helicopter out to a wind sea turbine, and when they got there they couldn't log in because the last guy had changed the password. But you can change all that, make it into a managed environment and a controlled environment. So whether it's a matter of convenience for the OT people or a matter of security, in both cases, we're aiming to deliver zero trust in a form that actually solves kind of both sides of that problem.
Well, from the carpet to the concrete, you've helped us understand the challenges of merging IT and OT security. Yeah. Duncan, thanks for joining us on the Dark Reading News Desk.
It was a great pleasure. Thank you for inviting me along.
We've been talking to Duncan Greatwood of Xage Security. This is Terry Sweeney for Dark Reading News Desk. We'll see you next time.